Welcome, everybody, back to the Friar Talk podcast and YouTube channel. So for today's episode, Ryan is going to be discussing some news. Very exciting, especially if you guys have been following the show, know our thoughts on Mr. Eric Hosmer. Unfortunately, Chase isn't here today. This week, also, we are only going to be posting 3 episodes. It's just a rough week scheduling-wise. So me, Ryan, and Isaac are going to have this episode that's coming out, Tuesday night? And then tomorrow, we're going to discuss some potential options at first base, in corner outfield, some guys that we think would be great fits. And then on Thursday, we're going to be posting Ryan's full offseason plan. It is massive. What is it, Ryan? 18 guys moving from the organization, 12 moving in. Is that what it was?
Yeah, 18 guys moving out, 12 guys moving in, and then 50 million off of the payroll. And then I'm turning around adding 64 million to the payroll. So it's gonna be huge.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun plan. So we're gonna go over that on Thursday. So make sure to tune in for that. But for today's episode, Ryan, you have some news for us.
Yeah, I wasn't actually expecting to be able to talk about this one today, but it's pretty interesting. So we're gonna go back to last offseason. This is some Eric Hosmer news. This hasn't been out anywhere in the media. So if you guys are, loyal to Friar Talk podcast, congratulations. Finally pays off because you got something that you're gonna hear first here. Sorry, jumbled my words there. So last offseason and spilling over into this past trade deadline, AJ Preller tried to make a very, very complicated and interesting trade involving Eric Hosmer, and that actually impacts what I'm hearing about Eric Hosmer right now. So this trade was between the Padres, the Nationals, and the Phillies. And while I don't know all the details because this trade never really got past its infancy stage where, there was some framework in place and, they knew the main pieces going to, the different teams and they were trying to work out which prospects were going as well. It was going to be Eric Hosmer going to the Phillies. Phillies would have eaten the entire contract there. But in return, the Padres would have gotten Bryce Harper and eaten his entire contract, and they would have taken Patrick Corbin from the Nationals, eaten his entire contract. Now, for very, very obvious reasons, this trade never happened. And this trade is not going to ever happen because if AJ Preller called the Philadelphia Phillies and offered this trade again, he would have his number blocked because Bryce Harper might win MVP. However, what I did hear the other day, which has to do with this, is AJ Preller is going to still go after that same format that he tried to work out with those two teams. He's going to try to trade Eric Hosmer in a 3-team deal this offseason. Now, it's really unclear as to how exactly he's going to do that. I don't know if it's going to be, prospects going to one team and, players going to the other team, or we're taking on bad contracts like he wanted to do with that Phillies Nationals deal. Well, I mean, they thought Bryce Harper was a bad contract then, apparently. That I'm not sure about. But what I do know is you can expect to hear some news later this offseason about AJ Preller exploring 3-team deals with different teams, trying to work out a more creative situation to move Eric Hosmer and not really, have it hurt as much to this organization trying to get rid of that bad contract. So that's what I got today. 3-team trades with Eric Hosmer are coming this offseason.
Yeah, the most important aspect of what Ryan just said is that the Padres have been willingly trying, very hard to get rid of Eric Hosmer and his contract. For any former Hosmer defenders, I'm sorry, you were severely, severely wrong. It was just, I think ever since the signing happened, it was just doomed to begin with, especially considering nobody else was offering him any contracts. I hadn't heard of anyone else offering him anything crazy. And who's the one team that did it? The Padres. And now who's, not getting any benefits from it? It's the Padres. I think everybody else knew, don't get Eric Hosmer, and only us. It was obviously for ticket sales. It was for obvious reasons. The Padres were in need of star power in order to get, people in the seats. And they thought Eric Hosmer would be that guy. Obviously not that guy. But, right now it's going to be a little bit of a hassle trying to get rid of Eric Hosmer. Good thing, it's a 3-team deal. It seems like we're willing to eat a bad contract, but hopefully it's a bad contract that's not as bad as Eric Hosmer's. Not only from like a salary perspective, but from a just production standpoint. I don't care if the player is that bad. I just don't want it to be Eric Hosmer bad. Quite possibly one of the biggest fall-offs I've ever seen in my life. So I think just the willingness to get rid of Eric Hosmer, take on other bad contracts, potentially DFA him, shows how invaluable, like how bad he is for this organization, and how bad the organization thinks that he is for the organization. So, really good news. We're trying to get rid of Eric Hosmer. It looks like, we've been trying for a long time, and it seems like this offseason, it's going to happen, mainly because in 2022 he gets 10-5 rights. So it needs to happen now. I know there are 10 teams that he has a no trade clause towards, but the rest are in play, and hopefully that happens.
So one thing I want to talk about real quick before I get into Eric Hosmer, you did say bad trades, Isaac, and I'm not going to say the Bryce Harper trade or contract is a bad contract. Now, I get the idea of trying to move him and like taking on a lot of salary and like trying to get a deal like that where you're not like getting like, I don't know, bad players. Like you're trying to go get a Bryce Harper, right? Like an MVP caliber player. But like you kind of talked about, Ryan, like it's pretty much impossible to do that at this point. Now, going back a little bit, Hosmer coming off of that short season, he had a 0.9 WAR in only 150 at-bats. He was a much better player in that 2020 season. And you look at his time in Kansas City, great player. But then when he came back, okay, that's right. Like this is who Eric Hosmer is again. This season, put up a 0 WAR over the 3 full seasons he's had in San Diego. This if you take away the 60-game season where he only played like I think 30-some games. He has a minus 0.4 WAR. That's on FanGraphs. So that's really, really, really bad. You're not going to win with a guy like this. You have to move him at this point. And I think while like that idea of like the 3-team trade to move him away, just because there's probably a team that's like, I'm not going to take on this much salary, and maybe 2 teams eat part of it, or they do something like that where it makes sense for the Padres to move on from whoever they have to move on to package him, or maybe they take on another guy that's like, I don't really know what you call it, like a guy with a bad contract, I guess. So maybe you see something like that, but I do think it's going to be a lot harder than I think it was last offseason to move him. And I think the Padres are really paying for that, while maybe trying to swing a little bit too high early on for Eric Hosmer, when it's like you probably could have sold at a higher point last offseason, even if it wasn't where you wanted to sell on. Because now you're going to sell at an extremely low point. He might be the least valuable player in terms of when you look at his contract and him. Now, luckily, it goes down to $13 million, but it still looks really bad when you're posting negative WAR over a 3-season span with I think actually 1,800 at bats. So that is atrocious. Like that is really, really bad. So anything else you want to add though, Ryan, before we take off?
Yeah, one thing I want to kind of piggyback on that. It might seem like we're being a little unfair to Eric Hosmer because, there's other guys, Patrick Corbin, who we just brought up, who have severely underperformed their contract. That's not the main reason why I think any of us personally want to get Hosmer off this team, or AJ Preller for that matter. You're seeing a lot in the media that he really wants to, and that's what I've been told as well. It's his refusal to improve. It's not that he doesn't want to get better. It's that he doesn't believe in the methods that the coaches are telling him he needs to use to get better. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to accuse anybody, but and I'm not going to outright say anything I'm not allowed to say. But Adam Frazier came over here at the trade deadline, and his launch angle, he was a line drive hitter, and then he comes over to the Padres, and all of a sudden he's hitting everything into the ground. And I'm just going to say that there is no hitting coach alive that taught him how to do that. And I'll just leave it at that. You can take from that statement what you will. That is, in my opinion, why he needs to go, because he is against the methods that have been shown by teams like the Giants and the Rays and other teams, using launch angle and exit velocity to improve their hitters, he's against that. And it's just a philosophical difference that can't be, ironed out.
Yeah. Like you said, pretty much aside from production, horrible, no good, very awful clubhouse presence from a guy that was pretty much signed to be a leader. Everyone thought he would be a leader in the clubhouse. Far from that, just a horrible person to have in your clubhouse, horrible person to have in your lineup, especially considering how much money he made. Easily one of the worst contracts in baseball right now. I mean, there's nothing good to say about the guy. Really, there's nothing good. I remember in April, early May, he was playing pretty solid. I was really happy with his performance. After that, we saw the real Eric Hosmer, the guy we've seen in almost his whole time in San Diego, proving that 2020 was an outlier. I think there's another guy that you could say 2020 might have been an outlier for that is also on a bad contract. I think you guys know how I feel about him. I'm not crazy about him, but
taking shots when Chase is in here. Real nice, Isaac.
I hope he sees this.
And we're not done either.
So, yeah, that's it. I hope to see Eric Hosmer gone.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for today's video. Remember, we're going to talk about in tomorrow's video, us three, the same people. No Chase, unfortunately, this week, but we're going to be talking about some options to replace Eric Hosmer, outfield options. You can have guys platoon, just different ways that they can go about replacing Eric Hosmer in the lineup and finally having hopefully some hitting production from the pitcher or the first base spot, because it just feels like, while his hitting hasn't been horrible, the overall performance in comparison to other first basemen, it's been bad. Slugging has been really, really bad. You need to generate power from the first base spot. So we're going to talk about options there. And then on Thursday, we'll be talking about Ryan's offseason plan. He'll be going over that. So that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you all for listening, and we'll be back and talking to you guys.